Hello everyone and welcome to a practical C++ tutorial on how to correctly separate and implement C++ classes into header and implementation files. We will explain the best practices, and here's a plan of this video tutorial. First of all, we will go over the theory. We will explain what are the good practices for writing classes and programs, and then we will do a practical example. Here's a simple example that we'll use as a proof of principle for demonstrating how to separate classes into the interface or header files and into the implementation file. The class that we will consider is a simple student class that defines the student name and student age, and what you can see over here is the header file. Then we will write an implementation file, and finally we will explain how to combine everything together into the application or the main file. Okay, let's start. A good practice for creating disciplined and reusable code is to separate different program components and classes into different files and to compile them separately. Then we can link them later on to create the final program. The idea over here is to compile a class only once and to use it in different programs, similarly to predefined libraries that are include input-output stream, or for example include string. Then if we change a particular class implementation, then we just need to recompile the class implementation file we change and not the complete program. On the other hand, if all the classes are included in a single program file, when a small part of the program is changed, we need to recompile everything, and this might take a significant amount of time. Another good practice that we will precisely describe later on is to split a class into files. The first file will briefly describe what the class is doing, and the second one will implement the class. That is, it will define the member functions and other class parts. So here are some good practices for writing classes and programs. Let us suppose that we have a single program consisting of a single class and a driver program. A good practice that leads to reusable code is to split the program into 3 files. First of all, we will have a class interface file. The class definition should be placed in a header file with an extension .h or .hpp. This file is called the interface file of the class. Then we will create a second file called the implementation file. The definition or implementation of all class member functions should be placed in another file with an extension .cpp or a similar extension. For example, the extension can be .cxx. This file must contain an include directive that includes the header file or interface file of the class, that is this file over here. The interface and the implementation file should have the same name and different extensions. For example, class1.h will be a header file or the interface file, and class1.cpp will be the implementation file. What is common over here is the class name. The class name is class1. The implementation file is usually compiled separately from the application file, and we will introduce application file later on. And the third file is the application file. The application file is also known as the driver file or the main file of our program. This file contains the main program and uses the defined class. The application file has to have an include statement that will include the header file, that is the interface file, and this is called, for example, class1.h. The application file is compiled separately from the implementation file, and this is very important. Once these two files are compiled, that is, once the implementation file and the application file are compiled, they're linked together and we create the final executable file. So here is the example. Let's suppose that we defined class 1. The definition of the class 1 will actually consist of the interface file or the header file, and we will call this file class1.h, and then we will have the implementation file class1.cpp. On the other hand, we will have application file, which is also called the driver file or the main file, and this file should contain this include statement, class1.h. That is, we need to include the header file. Over here, the implementation file should also contain the statement include class1.h. So here are some additional good practices and some standards when defining classes and separating them. When we write an include statement, we need to specify if the file to be included is predefined, that is, the file that is provided to us, or it is a file that we wrote. For the predefined file, we write include with these angle brackets. For example, include input-output stream, include string, include cstdlib. That is, we use the angle brackets for the predefined files containing libraries. On the other hand, if we defined a header file or the implementation files by ourselves, we need to type this include, and then we need to use quotes class1.h. So what's the difference over here? The difference is that quotes are being used for the header files or the interface files that we defined. On the other hand, the angle brackets are used for the standard C++ libraries and header files. Then, it's a tradition to give the same names to the header and the implementation files. However, over here the extensions should be different. That is, if the header file is class1.h, the implementation file should be class1.cpp. Then, we need to compile the implementation and application files, and we do not need to compile the header files since they are included. Then, both the implementation and application files contain the include directive include class1.h. By compiling the files, the compiler invokes a preprocessor that reads this include statement, and whenever it is encountered, it replaces it with the content of the file class1.h. And this is very important to keep in mind. Now, let's proceed with the example. Before I start with explanations, I need to mention that this video tutorial is based on Visual Studio Code for editing C++ code, and it's also based on the G++ compiler. That is, it's based on GCC C++ compiler. However, if you're using some other editor to write a code, there will be no problems as long as you know how to compile 2 or 3 files at the same time and to link them together. And that's pretty much straightforward. I will explain you how to do that in VS Code and by using the G++ compiler. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Over here, I will open a command prompt. Then I will do the following. I will go to my C drive, then I will go to the folder called codes. And in this folder, I have a special file, or actually special folder for C++ practice. So I will go to that folder, and this folder should be empty. In this folder, I will invoke my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so this is Visual Studio Code. Let's start. I will close these other files, and let's start from the beginning. First of all, let's define our header file. And over here, as a test example, I will define a student class mentioned at the beginning of this video tutorial. So let's click on File, New File, and over here, let's call the file capital student.h. This is our header file that will contain the class interface. And let's write this class interface. The first step when writing a header file is to implement the header file guards. These guards will make sure that the header file is not included multiple times in your C++ code and in other files. This is because C++ doesn't allow several definitions of the same class, and consequently we need to make some kind of statement saying that if you included it once, don't include it further. So let's do that. To do that, we need to use if and def, if not defined. This is an abbreviation, and the standard practice is to write with capital letters the name of the file or the class and underscore h. So if not defined this class, we do this. Define, oops, there's an error. Define student age. Okay, and then after that, we need to do this and if. Okay, so these are the guards that will make sure that everything that's inside is included only once in other C++ files. Next, let's include the standard libraries. That is, we will need input-output stream. Then we will need the standard cstdlib class, and then we will need the string class. Okay. Next, let's proceed with the definition of the class. However, before we do this, let's write using the namespace std. The name of the class is student. And how do we define class in C++? Well, like this. We will have public member functions over here, so I will type public, and we will have private member functions. Make sure that everything is inside of these guards. So what will be private functions? We will have the default constructor. This constructor will set the name of the student to 0 and the student age to 0. And let's define the private member variables. We will have string student name, for example, student first and last name. Then we will have integer student age. Okay. Next, over here, we need to have a member function that will set name and age once student object is being created. So we will do this. We will type void set name age, and over here the user will insert the input arguments or parameters. They will be name, and we will have int age. Okay, the next function or private member function, actually public member function, is the function to print name age, and here it is. It returns void, as well as this one. Now, it's a very good practice to add comments. So over here you need to comment and saying that this constructor will set name to, for example, no name, and age to 0. Okay, or you can be even more precise. You can put like this, student name, and you can use the private member variable student age to 0. So this is a very good practice. Then what happens over here? You can say this function sets, you can say student name is equal to name, then student age is equal to age once the object is constructed. Okay, next, let's continue. This function, let's write it like, will print student name and student age, and that's it. Okay, now over here I have my complete class, and this is now the interface of the class. For example, programmers would often look into the interface of the class and see what are the member functions, what do they do. And over here we use these comments to specify what the constructor is doing, what the set name age is doing, and what the print name age is doing. That is, we provided all the information someone else needs to have in order to know how to use this class. The next step is to define an implementation file for this class. So what is an implementation file? The implementation file needs to implement student, needs to implement set name and age, and needs to implement print name and age. That is, the implementation file contains the definition of these functions. So let's create the implementation file. First of all, let's save this file. To create the implementation file, click on File, click on New File, and over here I will call the file as student.cpp. While creating this name, I'm following the convention that the name of the implementation file, that is student, should match the name of the header file. Only the extensions should be different. And let's click on enter and let's save it, and here's the file. The first step is to include the predefined libraries. So what are the predefined libraries? We need input output stream, then we need another library, we need a string library, then we need cstd lib library, then over here we need to include our actual header file, and this is the main step. To include the defined header file, we type again include, and over here instead of angle brackets we need to use quotes. And we need to specify the name of the file. Here it is. So why we are using quotes over here and we are using angle brackets over here? Well, over here we are including predefined header files and libraries that are in the standard libraries that come with C++. Consequently, we use angle brackets to tell to the compiler and to Windows operating system where to find these predefined libraries, and they're precisely defined in specific folders. On the other hand, to include our own libraries or header files or the interface files, we use quotes. So keep in mind that. And over here, and finally, don't forget this statement using namespace std. The first step is to define our constructor. That is, we need to define this function. How to do that? First of all, we enter the name of the class, and over here we are saying that the member function student is actually a member function of the class student. And what do we do over here? We need to set the default values to the student name and to the student age. So over here I will simply copy and paste this, and we will say student name is no name and student age is 0, meaning that we just created the object and this object will not have name and its age will be 0. Let's continue. Next, let's follow the header file. Next, we need to implement this function. So I will copy and paste the prototype over here, and I will say the following. This class is a member of student, and that's precisely what I wrote over here. And then let's create the definition. What's happening over here? I simply copy and pasted this part over here, and I'm saying just student name will be name, that is the input argument provided by the user, and the age will be age. Simple as that. Let's continue. Next, we need to define the third member function. Here it is. So let's copy the prototype. Let's put it over here. And let's see. This function will simply print the student name and student age. And consequently, let's write cout, and let's type student name is, then let's print the private member variable student name, and let's close the line and create a new line, and let's print the age, cout, student age is, and we have student age, and let's end the line, and that's it. Okay, simple as that. This is the complete implementation of the student class. Here it is. So let's verify that everything is correct. The best way to do that is go back to the header file. And here I see some problems. We will correct them later on. Okay, let's see. Student, here it is. Student name, no name. Student age is here. Then, here I made an error or not. Here there is an error, so I need to write here student, print name age, and everything is fine now. So keep in mind that we careful what you're doing. It's really important. Okay, so to repeat, over here I had the syntax error and I corrected this error like this. So keep in mind that and correctly implement this file. Okay, the next step is to create the application file or the driver file. So how to do that? Well, let's click on File, let's click on New File, and I will call the file as application file.cpp. And over here you have a complete freedom to call this file as you wish. Let's click on and click on Create File. Okay, the first step is to include the libraries. And over here, I will simply copy and paste this part. The main thing over here is that I'm including student.h. That is, I'm including the interface or the header file of my class. And notice here that I'm not including the implementation file. That is, I'm not including student.cpp. Now, if I just try to compile this file after writing my main function, there will be an error. And the error will come from the fact that Visual Studio Code will only compile this file, and it's not going to compile student.cpp. However, for proper compilation, we need to compile student.cpp to create an object file. Then we need to compile application file.cpp to create another object file, and then we need to link these compiled files together to create an executable. And we need to modify the settings of Visual Studio Code to achieve that. Also, I will show you how to do that in a terminal window. That is, how to compile everything at the same time. This is a very important comment. Now let's write our int main function, int main, and over here I like to return 0. The next step is to create an object of our student class. To do that, I will simply write student and I will call it student1. Then let's set the name of the student. I will call student1 dot set name and age, and I will call my student as John Doe, and its age will be 20, and that's it. Okay, next let's print the student name and age. So let's type student 1 dot print name and age, and that's it. Simple as that. So that's our program. Better to say that's our driver file. Let's continue. Next, we need to explain how to create an executable file. I will do it first of all in the command window to show you the procedure. Well, I will go back to my command prompt, but before we go to command prompt, let's make sure that all files are saved. So click on the application file, save it, click on the student file, save it, and click on the student.h file and save it. Now go back to the command prompt and type this command to see the files. So we have application file.cpp, we have student file.cpp, and we have student.h. We need to compile application file.cpp, student.cpp, and then we need to link the compiled files together to create the output file. Over here, first of all, make sure that you have G++. Type G++ -- version. If you don't have G++, you can easily install it by using the mingw installer. I created a separate video tutorial explaining how to install mingw on a Windows machine, and I will provide a link to that tutorial in the description below. Over here I have G++, and then here's a magic command for creating the executable file. I'm calling my G++ compiler, and over here I'm telling that you need to compile everything with the extension CPP, and then you need to link everything together and create the executable file called output. And let's press enter and let's hope that there will be no errors. Good. Okay, now let's run again this command and to see what changed. You can see here the output file. So let's execute this output file and the program should work. So we can see student name is John Doe and student age is 20. Good, we are able to compile the file. Let's just change this driver file. Let's go, for example, this person is John Smith now, to make sure that everything works as it should. And let's say the student is of age 30, for example, a graduate student. So let's go again over here. Actually go back, save this file, and save this file. So let's go back to our command prompt. Let's see everything and let's repeat our command to compile everything into link. And then again, let's just execute the output.executable, and we can see student name is John Smith and its age is 30. Good. Next, let's explain how to compile the file in Visual Studio Code. Well, to compile the file, you need to click over here and you need to click on Run C or C++ file, and over here I will use this G++ compiler. Over here I will not use cl.executable, since cl.executable is Microsoft Visual Studio compiler and I cannot run it right now since I didn't run my command prompt in the developer mode. Consequently, I will select G++ and let's close this and click on Show Errors. So there are some errors. So let's investigate the errors. Click on Terminal and you should see the bunch of errors. So let's see what's written over here. Okay, undefined reference to student. Okay, so this thing is saying that basically it cannot recognize this student class. Student cannot be recognized. And set name age cannot be recognized, as well as the print name age. This means that we didn't compile this file and we didn't link it together. And consequently, we are not able to do anything in this project. Okay. So again, the issue over here is that the Visual Studio Code is actually only compiling the application file. And you can try it again and just show errors. Doesn't work. So let's learn how to fix this problem. Okay, to be able to solve this problem, we first need to understand what's happening behind the scene. Now, VS Code creates this hidden folder .vscode, and if you go to command prompt, you will see it over here. It's actually not hidden. It's hidden for Linux systems. However, over here you can see it. However, it starts with dot. Now, if you expand this folder, there is one important file called task.json file. Okay, and this file governs how the compiler is being called, and it governs also the compiler parameters. First of all, you can see the name of the compiler over here. This is G++, and you can see the path. The path is located on my C drive. You can see min GW, and you can see G++. Over here, you can see this parameter that's not important, this parameter that's not important, and here you can see what's happening. This means that we are only compiling a single file. Okay, again, this means that we are compiling only a single file. And over here, we need to tell to the compiler that we are compiling everything. And the easiest way to do that is actually to erase this thing and then be careful what you're writing here. First of all, we need to specify the path. We do it like this, then you do like this, and then you do star.cpp. This will tell to compiler to actually compile everything, that is all the files with the extension .cpp, and then to create an executable file. And here's how the naming convention goes. It's file base name no extension, which means if you're calling this from application file, that is if you're compiling from the application file, this will be application file, okay? And the executable file will be application file.executable. Let's keep it as that. So the main convention, or actually the main change, is to change this part over here. Okay, this is very important modification. Let's save And let's go to application file and let's try to compile everything. So click over here and click run cc file, and let's see the output. Over here you can see debug console, it's exited, and let's see the output terminal, and here it is. Student name is John Smith, and that's it. Now let's go back to command prompt, and you can see over here the file. So let's try to execute this file from this command prompt. So we will do this application file dot, just write it like this, and you can see the code is being executed. Okay, now let me tell you another thing over here. Let's try to execute this file from this terminal, and this is not an ordinary terminal, this is actually a PowerShell terminal. And let's say if you just type, for example, command, and let's try to type application file, which is executable, you cannot execute it like this. This is because you're actually in the command prompt. To execute file in the PowerShell, you should be careful. PowerShell command prompt, you need to type this, and then you need to type application file dot executable, and you will be able to execute the file. Another way is to actually invoke the command prompt. You can do it by clicking here, by clicking command prompt, and then you can normally just execute the file like this. Okay, that's all for today.